talk about raw vlog. Okay, so my camera died. I'm doing cloth diapers now. My son may or may not stay asleep. He's been pretty finicky about it lately. What was I saying before? Teaching my boys to be strong men. The grieving process. Yeah. There's good days and there's bad days. Obviously, you've caught me on an emotional day. You know what has been helping me? Netflix. Has anyone else been watching Bridgerton? I've been binge watching that, and Virgin River, which I was like, wow, she lost her husband, I lost my husband, except thankfully I have kids that will help me focus my energy on things, even though they frustrate me. Oy, do they frustrate me. Like last night my 8-month-old wouldn't go to sleep, and he kept waking up every, oh gosh, sometimes it wasn't even a full hour he would be sleeping, and I'm just like, please go to sleep, please. But you know that saying of this too shall pass. This too shall pass, and I get that. I mean, I'm on my 3rd child. I do know that I will get through it, and it will be over, and like a new thing will happen, and that too shall pass. But you know, during the moments where, or for me, it's been a couple of months now where I'm kind of living off 4, sometimes only 2 hours of sleep at night. It would be nice. It would be nice to have this moment pass a bit. I find something that is challenging for me is dealing with people's pity sometimes, you know? And I know I shouldn't bristle at this, but I do. Sometimes, you know, I don't want to tell people that, you know, I lost my husband and I'm trying to figure it out. Sometimes I don't want to say that, because then sometimes I get the, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, which is genuine, and I don't mind that. But then sometimes I get the, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, in their voice and the way that their face is and the mannerisms, and I don't know. Like, does that seem genuine when someone does that? Like, I don't know. And when my mom passed away, I've had some weird luck about this stuff. It seems like whenever I have a child, someone close to me passes away. But for my firstborn, when I was pregnant with him, my mother was going through her chemo treatments, and near the end of my pregnancy, she was told that, you know what, it's terminal, and we're going to stop treatments unless you want to do some experimental stuff, which I was like, oh my gosh, no. My mom has brought home all this research of these new experimental things that they wanted to try on her, and I just was like, Mom, no way. Like, do you want to do that? Like, and she was like, no, I don't want to be poked anymore. I don't want to be prodded anymore. And so I went with her to all of her chemo treatments while I was pregnant. And then when she was terminal, we kind of went with a more holistic approach, just things to keep her, you know, mentally happy and in as much physical health as possible. And then she was in palliative care, and then she was in hospice care. When I gave birth, she was still at home. She wasn't in palliative care yet. And I think she was really just holding on to meet her first grandchild. My son was born on June 2nd, and she got to, and he was early. I was only 36 weeks and 4 days or so. So he was preterm, not fully full term. And so we were also, I was breastfeeding, and while I was waiting for my breast milk to come in, we were also bottle feeding, and my mom was the first one to bottle feed him. And then he was jaundiced, so we stayed in the hospital longer. But, he was born June 2nd, and then my mom went into palliative care like a month later, maybe 3 weeks later after. And then after that she went into hospice care, where they kept her comfortable, and she wasn't very lucid anymore at that kind of point. It's like she went from and she has such a strong iron constitution, but she was perfectly fine. And then once my son was born, she could sort of so much she was letting go, okay, I've held on till my grandchild was born, and I've got to hold him and kiss him and feed him and love him. Okay, I can start to let go. And then her health kind of deteriorated kind of more swiftly from there. So when she was in hospice care, she wasn't as lucid anymore. She started talking about things like she had one foot on this world and one foot in the other world, and she was talking about playing hopscotch with her childhood friends, and she would say things like, make sure the coffee's on, I know a lot of people are coming, and I've seen a lot of visitors. But when she would see my son, her first grandbaby, when she saw him, it's like she snapped, something snapped into place, and she would say, how's my grandbaby? How are you, my love? And she would have all these talks with him, and he never cried for her. And she would say things like, she would know things so well. She would say, tomorrow's your baptism. I'm sorry I can't be there, baby. She would say, Anak, you be good, huh? You don't cry when they put the water on your forehead. You be a good boy and you listen. And he would never cry for her. Always sat nicely in her arms that she could barely lift because she was kind of getting weak. And it was just amazing to watch the connection that they had. And he listened to her, because at the baptism he never cried. Even when the priest kept calling Tristan a she instead of a he, because he was wearing this really flowy gown that it's a baptism gown. He kept saying she, and everyone would be like, Father, he. He never cried once, and she passed away August 5th, 2 months and 3 days after my son was born. And the day she passed away, I knew before I even got the phone call. I was at home. My husband just went with his cousin to go fishing, and they were literally, I think they were just almost on the dock kind of thing. They were about ready to get on, leave the dock. And I got the call, and I knew before I even got the call that she was gone, because my son, he was laying on the bed, 2 months old, and he was looking at the top corner of the room, and he was talking to somebody, and he was going blah 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 blah, and he was listening, and then he was talking, and he was laughing, and he was kicking his hands and his feet. And I was staring at him, and I was like, who are you talking to, baby? Because he was just so engaged with this conversation. It's almost like whoever he was talking to was trying to instill so much knowledge and love and everything into this baby at that moment. And I got the phone call while he was still having that conversation, and it was It was my brother, and he was saying, "Where are you right now?" And I said, "I'm at home." And he's like, "Well, can you come here? Mom just passed." And I remember as soon as I heard that, I was looking at my son on the bed talking, and then he fell silent, and I said, "Oh, okay. Let me just call Terry before he leaves the dock, and I'll get there as soon as I can." And I called, and I said, "I need you to come home." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "No, Mom passed away. I need to go to the hospice." And he said, "Okay, we're turning around." And his cousin was so good. Of course, he knew the situation, so he knew if something was going to happen, that, we would have to turn back around at a drop of a hat. And, it's so funny because his cousin, he's passed on now too, and yeah. So, it's kind of interesting that I had my first baby and my mom passed away when he was 2 months. And then I have my third baby and my husband passed away when he's three months. And also in August. August is just not the month for me, I feel. And I've had the experience of losing someone slowly over 2 years, and watching them deteriorate over a slow course of time, and knowing that, when they passed away, like, it's almost as they were slowly deteriorating, I was coming to terms with them leaving one day and knowing that they wouldn't feel in any pain. But I was already making my goodbyes, if that makes sense. Like, I was already understanding what the next steps were going to be. Whereas when Terry passed away, it was so sudden. It happened right in this room. It was so sudden, and my kids were 10 feet away. And I think that shock, that speed, how things happened, it was hard. It was difficult. It was jarring to the soul. And I remember having this conversation with, or maybe not so much a conversation, but I wrote it all out for my friend who was going through her mom passing away. And I kind of laid it out, like, which one is better. I've had the experience of both. Not one is better than the other, I think. You feel things differently in both situations. And you process things differently in both situations. With my mom, like I said, I was already saying goodbye to her. I was already understanding that she was dying already. And I knew that she wasn't going to be in any pain. And so my first thoughts were, like, of course it was sadness. But my second thought was relief, or my feeling was relief. She's not suffering anymore, and I was able to say goodbye. And with my husband, it was different. I wasn't able to say goodbye, and I wasn't able to process the quick death in the time that it happened. But I also remember, my husband, he's been in and out of hospitals most of his life, and me and him had discussions of death and him dying and all of that. So it's not a complete shock to me that he passed away. But he never let it get to him, and he never let it control his life. But I remember me and him being in the car, and I think it was just the two of us. And I said, one day when I die, I'm going first, not you. And he said very matter-of-factly, he said, as an Indigenous male, you are going to outgrow me by 30 years. And I was like, my mind just couldn't compute it. Like, I rejected that right away, and I said, nope, I don't care what the statistic says. I'm going first. And I want to go first so that if you remarry one day, you better find the right woman to be a good mom to our kids, because if not, I will haunt her ass, I will haunt your ass until you kick that chick to the curb. I mean, I made light of it, but yeah, I was like, and that stuck with me. And he said to me, like, I said, promise me, and he's like, you know, I can't make promises that I can't keep, so I can't make that promise. And I was like, fine, then just agree that I'll go first, okay? And he went, okay, but not in any confirmed way. And I kind of knew, like, oh shit. And we had more talks about death when he had a couple of health scares a few years back. And actually, he had a horrible, horrible health scare, to the point where the doctors didn't think he would make it through the night. And I found out once he cleared that and he made it through the night, and me and my son were sleeping in the ICU waiting room. Well, actually, we were sleeping in the ICU boardroom. And then later on, we were sleeping in the waiting room. But once he was out of ICU and he was in their step-down or step-up unit, I can't remember if it's a step-down or step-up unit, that's where I kind of realized, like, it's been a while since I've gotten my period. I better go check on that. And I realized I was pregnant. And I told my husband, and he said, I guess there's a reason why I held on and that I was fighting so hard. It's because I had a reason to stay. And yeah, I was pregnant with Emery. And so I could have been a 30-year-old or a 31-year-old widow instead of a 36-year-old widow. Well, 35 actually. I was 35 when he passed away, and then a couple months later was my birthday. So technically I was 35-year-old widow. And I'm so thankful that from that health scare, which was pneumonia that went septic, that he at least gave me 5 more years. 5 more years as a family and having another baby, and I'm just blessed. I'm grateful. Because I think that last health scare really put in perspective for me that, hey, things can go wrong at a drop of a hat, and I need to be prepared and make sure that I'm mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually prepared to do this alone and be a mom to these kids alone. And I've always kind of had that in the back of my head because, like I said, Terry was in and out of hospital for most of his life. And when I dated him, I think we were only together 3 months, and he was in the hospital. And it wasn't a death scare, but it was serious enough that he was in a lot of pain, and the doctors were scratching their head trying to figure out how to help him. And so he never sugarcoated anything for me. He never hid the fact that he was ill, and that his life would be moments of being in the hospital. And we learned how to weather each of those storms the best we could. And for me, a lot of it was keeping busy. And whenever he would have these health scares, I immediately went into survival mode. And I talk about it in my post about grief and everything, but I call it cutting the fluff. And for me, that meant a lot of things that weren't necessary for us to survive as a family got cut out quick. So going to soccer practices, or me going out with my friends, or any long-standing engagements that we would have that weren't necessary, that weren't needed, they went away. And that also meant, like, at that point in time, I wasn't calling people to say, like, hey, how's your day? What's up? It was, for me to call people, it meant that I really needed help at that time. Because sometimes he would be sick and he would be in the hospital, and then he would be recuperating, and that would be months. Or he would be in and out of hospital for months because his meds weren't working and his numbers were dipping, and I was a single mom, and during those times I was an emergency single mom, and I needed to figure things out. But through it all, when Terry got out of being in those dips of health issues, when he was out of those dips, he would always come back kind of in full force. He was helping with the kids and helping in the house and that sort of thing. And I think he did a lot for us, and I think he did a lot for not only just us, but his other family members, like his sisters, his siblings, his mom. And I think he did so much because I think he knew he was on borrowed time, and I think he knew that while things were good, he better make it the best he could until the next health scare. So he's like the best husband he could be, the best dad, the best brother, the best son. He was just so innately good. Like, down to his cell structure, he was just such a good person. Then it made people around him want to be good too, that try hard to be good, better. Because even though he never said it or he didn't force it, it was his constant good personality that just made others want to strive to be like that. And I don't know how he was in high school, and I don't know how he was as a child, but from the stories I heard and from people who have stepped forward to write me letters or emails or cards, who have come to my doorstep with gifts, they've just been so impacted by his presence, even if it was just for a short creek tour or lifelong friends. Terry just got under their skin and made such an impact in their life. And he is just one of those bright stars that made the world a lot more dimmer when he left. And, you know, I'm surrounded by his legacy through his children and through the work he did and the kindness he brought and the work he did for his family and his community. He left this legacy, and I want to make sure I do right by it. And maybe I'm putting too much pressure on myself. It could be. But I want to make sure that my kids understand that the teachings that he imparted were important to keep, and the things that he was passionate about are important to remember. His pride in who he is and where he comes from. And that he put his family above everything else. Yeah, not sure exactly where my head's at right now. And that's okay. I'm looking at a really mild winter and I'm starting to see some of the bulbs that I put in are starting to poke through, and that's kind of exciting for me. Terry and I, we had dreams for our garden to grow and to start producing more food for not only our family but for other people as well. It was kind of our dream to build things with the overall understanding that it was going to be spread out amongst the community. Build more raised garden beds and plant more fruit trees so that again we can get to make it more intergenerational, so having some of the kids in the community help work the land and learn some new skills and have something to do other than screen time, but also helping bring those produces, that hard-earned produce that was created, and bring it out to the community. And I still want to continue those dreams, but a part of me is just scared to venture forth doing that without him. Well, I don't want this segment to be too long. It's probably really long already. I'm sorry it's not a funny one. It's just a bag of crazy. No, I'm kidding.
Speaking of a bag of crazy, my camera decided to stop filming on me, so I'm going to have to stop it here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye!